Okay, so the next talk is Jan and Adolf, who are going to talk about Botception, hire a botnet to spread one's own botnet.
Hello, everybody. Before we all dive into our presentation, let me introduce ourselves very quickly. My name is Sirmer. I'm working in Avast for the last 9 years, currently as a malware analysis team lead. And this is my colleague Adolf Streda. He's a software engineer in Avast software, and his interests are the botnet and cryptography. Well, today I would like to share with you the info from our research based on the network monitoring. And during our monitoring in the early of 2018, we found out there was a change in the pattern of the regular spread samples to the network botnet from the branch we are monitoring. It was actually pretty interesting because one day they started sharing the VBS script, which was slightly obfuscated, and when we look into it was very interesting what we found out. So, at the beginning, it's not working? Oh, it's working good. So, at the beginning, I will give you just really short and brief info about the network history. Then I will share with you how we monitor the network branch, and what we get information, how we get information from this branch, etc. Then, of course, they provide you the chain of whole infection, the data we got from this branch. And then we will dive deeply into the VBS control panel, the information, we will describe the functions of this VBS control panel. And because we found out more versions, we will also compare these versions. And then Adolf will go to the stager and the final payload we got from this. And of course, at the end, there's going to be some summary of our talk. It's really necessary, right? So, the history of network provided, all of you know the network botnet actually. It's definitely the largest spam botnet worldwide, and it appeared in late 2012. And the biggest campaigns spread by networks were, for example, the DDoS, Loki, and Globe Imposter. Well, now I will tell you how we are monitoring the branch, how we got information from it.
So before we get to the tracker itself, I'll start a little bit with network protocols. Oh, that's it. So we are interested in 3 protocols. There should be, I think, 2 more, at least so far. So the most important protocol is C2 protocol. This protocol is used in communication with control command server. It's used to distribute new peers, peer lists, which are used as fallback. Then it is used to distribute new IP addresses of these servers, or even new modules with their respective parameters. If this protocol fails, there's a peer-to-peer protocol that's used to recover these addresses, or sometimes there's something I shall call a shared secret, a small, I think it's 4 bytes of information taken from the public key which belongs to the server, and this value is used to derive the communication key, and of course those branches, I will get to them soon, are identified by URL path. So if the path changes, it has to be updated over peer-to-peer protocol. And as I said, there's something called modules. So we got their mail module. There should be, I think there are 2 more known modules, but for our purposes, mail module is the most important one. It's used to distribute email templates, recipient lists. And those templates are, let's say, scripted. So you have to also receive some variables which are also distributed through this protocol. So now to the tracker itself, we reverse engineer the client and we try to emulate it. And also, since the protocol distributes a list of new peers, we try to aggregate this list and try to keep track of the botnet's activity. Each branch is identified by the shared secret. So every branch corresponds to one, let's say, password that is used. Then these branches have further sub-branches. These are identified by peer-to-peer shared secret. Again, in a similar way, there's another public key which is used to sign messages that are sent through this protocol. So again, the messages are encrypted, and the base for the key for this encryption is again some bytes from this key. Currently, we are tracking 4 sub-branches, all belonging to the same branch. As far as I know, there are at least 5 other branches. However, we are not tracking them yet. The branches I mentioned, or sub-branches, identified by URL paths, locator PHP, news index, news soap, news stream, pretty much generic addresses. So how does it work? The core module, that's the network itself. It contacts its CNC server. Hey, got some interesting data, and provided there's a new module, I got back its hash, so I can then similarly recover the module from the CNC server. So suppose we downloaded mailer module. So we download it, execute it with parameters that are given before. And this module is pretty much simple. It asks for template. We receive a template, and it looks something like that. As you can see, there are some variables. So for example, message ID is pretty much random. And there's one other thing. In the bottom, you can see item called 1.doc, which is taken from the list. It's an attachment. So at the beginning, along with the template, I receive a list of items I have to ask for. So let's say there's 1.doc, and I have to request this item separately. Then I insert it into the email. Then I forward this email to a SMTP server and send it to intended recipients. So let's get to the infection we would like to describe. So at the beginning, we got our network botnet, or more specifically our monitor branch. From that, we recover a template and resources. So we got internet shortcut. That was quite suspicious. And this shortcut referred to VBS control panel, which again tried to contact its own CNC server, which used completely different infrastructure, which offered us a new binary. The script tried to execute it, and after several stages, it led to float-AMI remote administration tool. So now I let Jan tell you something about the panel itself.
Well, when I will go through the control panel itself, maybe some of you, especially those who were on the great presentation this morning by Jose, will see a lot of similarities. Actually, we found out this control panel is the same as the RS VBS loader, but no worries, actually, we look slightly really differently on this same issue. We'll show you some information. So, at the beginning, as we mentioned, the victim received then some spam message, which contains the attachment. There is the internet shortcut in the 7-zip archive. And when we unpaid, we receive this shortcut. So there are 3 interesting parts. Of course, the first one that we can see, there is some random name.vbs. So there is running the Visual Basic script. Then the case that the user just downloaded it and not running it immediately, they are trying to set up some icon to fool the users or victims to run it later. And the most interesting part for us, if you look in the URL, they are using, instead of the HTTP or HTTPS, they are using the file. This is SMB sharing, which allows them, if the user run this internet shortcut, to directly open the VBS script and run it from the SMB share. That's the big benefit for the attackers. But fortunately for us, it's also beneficial for us because we can get all pre-prepared samples on the SMB share. So when you look there, we could easily download all VBS which are prepared for the future campaigns, get the payload, and analyze it, create actions, etc. And probably the biggest advantage of the SMB sharing that the author of the malware can leave you some lovely messages like this. Because we love it, right? It's very nice that you can chat with them and share some common interests together. Well, when I go directly to the VBS script, actually, it's communicate with the CNC server. But the interesting part is hard-coded CNC server address. And in all samples we went through, actually, there was only one CNC server address. but the script itself is prepared to contain more addresses which can be changed in a time. It's getting some information about the infected device, which can be used to identify the user device, or in the future it can be also used by the attacker to avoid running the script, for example, in the virtual machine, etc. As I mentioned, they are prepared for update with fallback CNC servers in the case that the CNC server, the primary CNC server, stop responding. They can easily switch it. But so far, we didn't see more than one. So, but they are ready for the future. If somebody wants to use it, update it. And the communication is pretty easy. It's just using the simple post request on the domain with the CNC server. Is going to post request to the gate PHP with all the information and the commands gotten from it used. Well, when I look into the functions of this VBS control panel, there's several functionalities. One of them is download and execute. There are two options actually. It can download and execute the executable file or plugin. Actually, it's pretty easy. It's just got from the CNC server the URL which should be connected and what kind of file should be downloaded. And the same is for the plugin. In fact, the only difference, they're just downloading the DL file and then register it and run it. And as you can notice here is the string, actually, the RS, which was mentioned by Jose in the morning, as they name it RS VBS loader. But in fact, it's just really working as a control panel or another botnet. Several more functions actually. It's the upgrade control panel and delete control panel. So they can just easily, if they receive the command update or delete, they just go to the all location where is the original VBS located and set up the string which we receive. In the case of uninstall, it set up just the white space into the all files and then kill the script running. So they can easily just get rid of all, like the evidence from the infected device, etc. Our function actually is pretty interesting. They can easily run the DDoS attack. So in the case the DDoS command is gotten by the control panel, they just use again the simple post with the hard-coded string. So they receive the two arguments actually. The first one is the targeted URL and the second one is the number of the attack which should be done by the control panel. And of course, each stuff, even this one, needs some persistence. To persist, they are using three different functionalities. Actually, the first one, they are running schedule task. They set up the Chrome update. The script itself is set up as a Chrome update, and it's run in the setup time. Another way, they write the register key into the run. And to be sure that nobody kill or stop the process, they are using the watchdog, something they call watchdog. We're just checking if the script is still running, and in case it stopped, they just lock the information, they trigger in the cell defense, and rerun the script again. And as I mentioned, the login, of course, the login is a key actually. Actually, I have to admit that when we went through the VBS script itself, I've probably never seen better commented and logged script written by the malware authors. In fact, I think they're writing better than us. Because like everything was commented, each function has some log part and setting info into the va.txt. As I mentioned at the beginning, actually, we receive more versions. There were some differences in the obfuscation. The first one was pretty easy. The only interesting part, the script reads itself, and from the commands, it's decode the final payload. And in the version 2, they try to obfuscate it slightly harder, that to avoid the regular string detections, etc. The most interesting part, actually, is when we look into the obfuscated part. As you can see in the bottom part, actually, it shows us, the red line shows us the similarities in the code. And as you can see, they are just shifted slightly. So it shows us that the big parts of the code are the same, and they just add and remove some functionalities in the version 2. As you can see on the left, there is the version 1, and on the right, there is the version 2. In this case, they just add the possibilities to use even the PowerShell in the code. Well, now I'd like to add word to Adolf.
So before we get to payload, which was fetched by this control panel, let's recap it a little bit. We got a botnet, let's say this control panel, which is more or less like a bot, that's spread inside another botnet. So does it end here or not? So let's have a look at the payload. The payload is a rather simple stager. It employs several anti-emulation tricks, for example, repeated external function calls with no observable side effects. Then it checks for several Windows system processes, so for example, Explorer, exe, yada yada. And it does some cleanup. Among other things, it tries to replace all old AMI-related services and establish new ones. It also checks for several AV products with a possibility of termination if they are detected. And then it proceeds to downloading payload. As you can see on the screen, the address is again hard-coded. And the payload is encrypted. It's encrypted by RC4 cipher. The key, again, it's pretty much obvious that it's hard-coded. The payload surprisingly contained float AMI, which is quite a common remote demonstration tool, which is based on a source code that leaked several years ago from software, which is called AMI admin. So far, we suspect it's the last stage. We haven't been able to observe further communication or further attempts to download more stages, even though it's within capabilities of this RAT. It can establish a remote desktop, it can move files back and forth. You can use it to establish a proxy through the client or even start an audio chat. So to conclude our presentation, we are able to track somehow email spread directly by the botnet by querying directly, and we are able to get our hands on quite an interesting file that was spread through internet shortcut in an email attachment. It was distributed through SMB share, and it was quite a simple BBS script. The script downloaded a stager, which in turn downloaded a RAT called for AMI. So I think that's it. That's all from us, and probably now is the best time for your questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jan and Adolf.